am Vonia.
I'm Averyn.
And we are the hosts of
Crime. Crime.
which stands for romantic crimes,
Yes.
sort of, right?
It's basically a play on the idea of romantic comedy. Comedy? I said comedy. Romantic comedy. It's so hard to say. And true crime.
Well, that's the thing. Vonia loves romantic comedies.
And Averyn is obsessed with true crime.
And I'm like, this is Vonia, hi. And I'm like secretly kind of like, I'm like fascinated by it, but like scared. Like I'm like behind my mom's skirt. I'm like, no, tell me the awful details.
Right. And I spend hours watching TV shows and researching things on the internet and movies, anything about serial killers, or I love like FBI profilers, like and all of the psychological details of like why people
Amazing.
become
Why they are.
serial killers.
Yeah. That is so crazy. Honestly, like, okay, so before we even started our show, like I was doing some research because as I go through, I really like, why did they do it? Why?
Because they're terrible people and they do such horrible things.
But why are they terrible people? You know, like what made them the way they are?
Right, and then you did some research.
And I did some research, and
it's no definitive answer, which is kind of scary.
That to me is the scariest thing about all of this. Like, you know, Averyn, you know, I also am really I get scared. like horror movies, even like fake. Oh, I went to Hollywood Horror Nights.
Right, I want to go.
Oh my God, we had so much fun, but I really honestly was like, oh, I didn't take a Xanax or anything. I mean, like, because I do have panic attacks, it's something I suffer from when I get really scared, but, you know, mostly I'm like, you know, in closed spaces, lots of people, kind of scared person, but...
And you said you had a ball,
Oh my God, it was so much fun. People are, like, it's insane. It's dark, which also the dark is scary, and they have so many, they call them scare actors, come out and, scare the shit out of you.
Scare actors. What a gig.
I know. Oh, you know.
Yeah, but I should look into that.
You should look into that. You really, I feel like those poor kids get a lot of exercise. Yeah. But yes, I had so much fun.
Well, that's the thing, too, that I think is one of the things that people often, I don't know if it's ignore or fail to recognize about why certain people really do seek out, like me, like horror movies. Yeah. Take me to the horror night, or you know, like haunted houses. It's an adrenaline rush. Like
that's true.
Fear and adrenaline are you know, like they go hand in hand. And so there is something, like you said, when you were like, I was screaming, I was jumping, I felt kind of high. Is the word you used when you were telling me about it? It's
true. Afterwards, I was like, holy shit! Like, why don't we do this every day?
Right.
Like, it was really fun.
I always want to be just a little bit terrified because it makes me feel kind of buzzed.
You know what? I think that's why I used to be an actor, and more so like stage. And the truth is like afterwards you are like flying high because it's scary. You know, it's like
always terrifying.
It's really scary before. You're like hoping you're going to entertain people. And
I was always convinced I had to pee so bad I was never going to be able to actually get on stage.
I love that that's your fear. I'm like, I will piss my pants on stage. I do not care.
Well, that was like how my fear and adrenaline manifested was like, it was also when I was a kid and I was on the swim team. Every time I would step up onto the board, you know, like when you would dive off into the race, right as I would be in like next in line, so I'm on deck, all of a sudden I would have to pee. And it felt like I had to pee worse than I ever had to pee in my life. And then once you dive in the water and you finish the race, I didn't have to pee anymore.
Right.
That was like how my anxiety or fear, I guess, of what was going to happen was manifesting. And I used to get that with before going on stage too. I'd be like, oh, I need to pee. You can't pee. You have to go on. You have 3 more lines before your entrance. And then the minute you go on and you start, I never actually had to run off stage and pee.
I had a director once tell me that pee energy was good, so just go
so
for
it's
it.
Positive
and
energy.
Maybe that was just like a mind fuck that they were doing for us because whatever. I mean, mind you, this was like, I did like community theater and all that fun stuff as well, which is the most of my theater. And, you know, a little bit of downtown New York theater.
I was going to say, we did lots of downtown New York theater.
We did. But now I do this podcast because I need an outlet. And thank you, everyone, for listening.
Yeah, thank you for being here with us. We're going to try to blend the best aspects of romantic comedies and true crime. So basically, we're just getting rid of the comedy.
Right. So it's going to be a really boring. I'm kidding.
Not boring, but probably not too funny. Or at least the stories. Maybe were funny.
Here's the thing. I will be uncomfortable, so I'll make bad jokes. So great.
Great. So that's where the
So
comedy
it
will
might
come
be
in.
funny, it might not be, but I'll just be like, oh my God, why? But today our story is not so funny. It's not funny.
It's not funny at all. And one thing that I actually meant to tell you before we started, but here we are, so we'll
Jesus,
just do it
Mary
now.
and Joseph,
no,
what?
is that I think it's what is interesting to me when I went down a rabbit hole of like killer couples and landed on this one when we were going to do the Amy Fisher story that we ended up doing. And I was like, I almost changed it on you because I was like, oh my God, this is crazy. But as somebody who has always been fascinated with serial killers, you know their names. There's like BTK and the Golden State Killer and Dahmer and Bundy and all of that. Why don't people know about these
This one's
people?
intense. I think it's because it was a short period.
I guess.
It was like a summer of love.
And I suppose that it was also, when I was doing some research, that it was also going on in tandem with the Hillside Stranglers. So there was like other serial killing happening in Los Angeles.
Oh, shit. Well, tell them what we're doing. Who
So we're doing the Sunset Strip Killers.
The Sunset Strip Killers.
The Sunset Strip Killers.
Okay, so it makes me, every time I drive on Sunset, I am always like, Sunset Boulevard.
I know, me too.
Twisted Boulevard.
I'm always like, with one look, I could, I don't remember the words. But yeah, Sunset
true.
Boulevard.
A little
I work on,
scary.
actually, you know what? I work on Sunset Boulevard.
Don't tell the people.
Well, I mean, I'm not going to tell you where. Sunset Boulevard is a very, very big
She works
boulevard.
on the corner. I'm just kidding.
But I do work on Sunset
We
Boulevard.
talk about prosties a lot today. So
Yeah, we're going to
she's
call
not
them
a prosty.
sex. We're going to call them sex workers.
Sex workers. Thank you. I appreciate sensitivity. And I do. Here's the thing. I am just going to keep mentioning when I am uncomfortable, I do make jokes. And so if I am insensitive at all, that's why. Sorry. Okay. Wait, so the Sunset Strip Killers.
Killers, yes. And so, in keeping with our theme for the kinds of crimes we're talking about, this is a couple
Yeah.
that became a killing couple, or a duo of serial killers, if you will.
They were a team.
A team,
Much
yeah.
like a team of marriage, but not.
Right.
Okay.
Well, they weren't married.
They weren't. No,
But
that's true.
I think let's start. I think you had a great idea. Let's start with the rom part
We're
of our
talking
rom
about the
crime.
Rom.
Let's talk about how these two met.
little
Do you
cutie
want to
patooties.
start with that?
Sure. Okay. Because this is like anything like less upsetting on. We'll definitely talk about. I'll just dive right in. Okay. So these two lovebirds met at a bar called the Little Nashville in Burbank.
And do you know why she was there?
Yes. Okay. So yes.
This is why it's so twisted.
I know, it's
Their
so
meet
twisted.
cute is not cute.
It's not cute. It's not cute. But okay, so tell me if I'm wrong because I did research this time in our past episode. I have not done research and I was like, I should know something. So I'm just like facing my fears of the scary stuff and it's good. Actually really good and very fascinating, I'll be honest. I've been thinking about
right?
it a
It's
lot.
fascinating.
And yeah. So okay, so I think we need to talk about Carol first.
Okay, let's talk about Carol.
Is that okay?
Yeah,
Like,
absolutely.
okay, so-
We're gonna go actually pre
Yeah,
Meet
pre-meet cute.
cute.
Yeah, the two of them, the Rom.
the least cute meet cute of all time.
Okay,
But yeah, let's talk about Carol.
so I feel like if we talk about them and then we can talk. Okay, so Carol had a very sad childhood. Both of her parents were like abusive alcoholics.
Yeah,
right?
her name, so I guess we'll just say her full name
right.
because her name is Carol Bundy,
Yeah.
which again is also why when I first started reading about this couple, I was like, how did I never hear about the female Bundy serial killer?
Right.
Like Ted Bundy is one of the most prolific, famous names you know, and there was a woman who is known as a serial killer whose name was also Bundy. And I was like, how did I never hear about this? They're not related.
They're not related.
They're not related.
I did know that. That is crazy. That is crazy.
But yeah, so she definitely had an
had a very
incredibly rough
fucked up
childhood. Her parents were like both just terrible parents. You
Yeah.
know, her dad was physically and sexually abusive.
Well, here's the thing. I guess, and maybe he was before, but like I guess the mom dies, right?
Right.
And
Well,
then,
that's when the sexual abuse started.
It's not like a Disney movie when a mom dies.
No, but also the crazy thing about the mom. So
Tell me, I don't know
she
this.
was
So Carol Bundy's mama.
Carol Bundy's mama, whose name
Jesus.
I guess I should have written down.
Let's call it Janet.
Well, I don't want to offend Janets out there.
What about Janice?
Janice? Okay. Her mother, Janice, was a really, really beautiful woman. In fact, she was a stand-in for the famous tap dancer Ruby Keeler. So like she had like aspirations of Hollywood stardom, and she was a beautiful woman. And Carol Bundy was an awkward, I'm just gonna say it, an unattractive, awkward child.
Yeah.
And basically, inexplicably one day, and I can't remember exactly how old she was, shout out to Wikipedia and Murderpedia where I got all of my information. So if any of this is inaccurate, it's not my fault, it's their fault.
Yeah.
But where she came home one day from school, and her mom just like decided to ice her out. Like she no longer existed, wouldn't let her in the house. She said, "You're not my daughter." Like, and just shunned her completely.
Emotional neglect.
Yeah, but I mean, why? They never give you any actual explanation. Like, to me, that suggests that her mother had some kind of mental issues.
That could be,
Where
and
you
also
could go
maybe
be like someone's mom one day, like send them off to school with like their lunch, and like, "Bye, honey," and then when they get home, you've locked them out of the house and you refuse to acknowledge they exist.
Oh, that's really sad, and that'll do it to you.
Yeah.
So then the mom dies, and then the dad
the dad insists that his two daughters take her place in his bed until he remarries.
She had a brother. She had a
sister.
daughter.
She had a sister, which is actually why they were able to confirm when they were doing like all of the interviews and trying to find out if she was even like sane and capable of like standing trial, all of the abuse that she alleged at the hands of her father, her sister actually corroborated all of that.
Was like, yeah, it
yeah.
happened
She's
to
like,
me
no, that
too.
definitely happened. So yeah, so
Okay.
that happened.
So then the dad gets married, and then she goes into foster care,
Yeah.
and so sadly she was born like in 42, so
Right. Yeah, because
whenever
the
that
whole
was,
I think that she and Doug met in the like either
80.
set 80,
it was 1980.
1980.
Their whole like affair happened from June to August 80.
Oh, all right. And so many things did they do
So
in that
many awful
short, brief
things.
time. But yeah, so basically, one of the things they say that Carol did when we talk about kind of like where she's at mentally and kind of where she was coming from. So they were in and out of foster care, like foster homes, but then they did eventually end up back with their dad and his wife. At one point, I guess he had like tried to kill everyone, like Family Annihilator style, but wasn't successful. The stepmom, the wife, had like somehow gotten away and gotten out, and then he was, so it was just a terrible home life. So at 17 years old,
That's the only part I know. I didn't know about the whole-
married a 56-year-old man who also happened to be a drunk and probably was very reminiscent of her dad. I mean, I'm speculating.
Well, yes.
But
I mean,
like, why
if
would you, to
a
get away from your dad who is a drunk who abuses you, like, you're not 17 and you marry a 56-year-old drunk.
Yeah, also really yucky. I mean, 17-year-olds should be having sex with not 56. It seems like
With
the
other
56-year-old has to be like maybe a little bit of a pede.
Well, and one of the things they also, this is a sidebar because I know we're just kind of going through her history,
there.
but
We're
one of the
getting
things that I think that I read that they kept bringing up was that what Carol learned at a very young age at the hands of her mom and her dad because of the horrible abuse that she suffered, but when she would be asked about them, she would always say, only remember good things. Like, she tells this story all the time about how her dad, the first time she lost a tooth, made the tooth fairy real by taking one of her dolls and getting its feet like covered in mud and doing little footsteps away so that she could see that the tooth fairy had come and gone and left money under her pillow. So like clearly I'm thinking there's some manic, I don't know. I have no background in
but
kind
that's
of
what
like
we're here for, to totally
speculate
to
and
speculate.
comment. But anyway, so she basically was the kind of person who would always forgive her abusers, and that was her power, is that they could do whatever they wanted, and she would always say, "I still love you and it's okay." And that is exactly the kind of energy that
could help
existed between her and Doug Clark.
Yes. Oh
where it was
my
like,
God.
so she was, that was kind of, I don't know if it's a manipulation or if it's just, that was just her coping mechanism, but she was always willing to forgive, see the best in, no matter what was going on, as long as she could hold on to that love and that attention from those people that she loved.
It is so crazy as humans. We're just survivors, right? Like I have a friend in New York, and he would always be like, if I was nervous or because I'm a little neurotic, and I'm like, what about this? What about why should we have children if the world's gonna end? I have two. But anyways, he was like, you know what? humans are like cockroaches. We figure out a way. And so I feel like, but you
Yeah,
know,
we do.
She figured out a way
To cope.
and to like tell herself it's okay and all those things.
And honestly, you know, from the research that I did, and I think that I'm just going to come out now and just tell you that I don't think Carol Bundy is a sympathetic figure or character in this story. I think that she is a very messed up person who did some terrible things, and clearly also had a really driving need for the attention she was clearly deprived as a child, and was pretty much willing to do whatever it took to maintain the affections of whichever relationship we're going to touch on.
Yeah.
But that was definitely, I think, a big part of, you know, and that's a and I don't want to say that now. I feel like I'm acting like I know shit. But that is a tool, that is a form of, I think, some kind of relationship manipulation. Whereas we'll also talk about how manipulative the men she was with. But this 56-year-old was what, the first of three?
Yeah.
All right.
So I only know, basically what I read was basically the first and then the third that she got away from, but she had 2 kids with.
Right. Okay, so
babies.
One of them's obviously, his name was Bundy, because that's not her given name.
Oh.
So she was married to the old dude, she was married to a Bundy, and then she was also married to, I think maybe Bundy was the last husband, which is why that was still her last name, because she never married. That would make sense. So the second husband, I believe his name was Paul Geis, but I can't, don't quote me on that, but it's something similar.
But you know what? Why do people get married so much? Like, just have sex with someone.
I mean,
like, why do you have to get married? Yeah. But I guess that's an 80s thing. Sorry, keep going.
And this would be like a 70s thing.
Oh, right, yeah.
Or maybe even a 60s thing.
Right.
But like, probably a 70s thing. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, but I think obviously it seems like in what I was reading that she was she was trying to create a family, you know, like she wanted that so bad. So I think her second husband was a writer.
Okay, didn't know that.
And encouraged her to write. And she even had an article or an op-ed or something she wrote published in like a national magazine. She was also a really great, like brilliant cartoonist, but she just quit all of that. And then eventually, I can't remember the details, but their marriage kind of fell apart, but they remained friendly. Huh. And then she married the Bundy guy, not Ted.
Right.
Had 2 children with him. They were both in like the medical field. She was a nurse.
She's a nurse practitioner.
And I think he was also a nurse practitioner. Jesus. But she basically started to go blind.
What?
And so she'd always had bad eyesight, and her eyes were deteriorating greatly. So being a nurse when you can't see is pretty much impossible. So then her last husband, the just genuine hero he was, started to like beat the crap out of her because the prospect of having to take care of their 2 kids and her, knowing that she wasn't going to be able to continue working now that she was going, so he was going to have like a disabled wife and 2 kids. And so she fled with her 2 children to like a battered women's shelter.
Oh, I did not know that.
And that's actually something that they could prove. Like there was a provable record that she had been in a shelter for battered women because her husband was abusive. Oh my God. She did get her kids out of there, and I will say like that was at least like a genuine decent moment of like removing your children from a bad home.
But here's the next step. Okay. So wait, maybe should we pause and then go back to Doug's upbringing? Or what do you think?
Yeah, well, why don't we explain let's talk about Doug's upbringing, and then we can talk about how they met, which will then send us back in time to what happened after she left the women's shelter.
Yeah, okay, good. So Doug, good old Dougie Doug,
Daniel was actually his name, but he wanted to be called Doug.
Weird.
Why?
And his last name was Clark. Yeah, this guy, I'm sorry. I don't mean to be an asshole, but I immediately was like, it was the guy. And yes, I'm sorry.
Yeah. The husband always does it. Or the dude always does it.
Well, it seems like that, but she was there's a lot of awful women that do bad things to
of course.
Still, I was the same way. I was like, oh my God. So he was, apparently his dad was like a naval officer, but like in the...
something like, elite. They were like a very wealthy family. He lived all over the place. Went to high school.
Countries.
Like went to high school in Geneva with like a bunch of UN ambassadors' children and like famous people's kids.
Yeah, but I think, in my research of the psychopaths, if they it seems like this guy was definitely emotionally, ignored. He probably didn't have a lot of like.
Right.
Like helicopter parents happening
100%. They actually, I feel like they did mention that every time he got in trouble, His parents would just, like, basically deny that he would have ever done anything wrong and defended him, but they weren't, like, present. You know what I mean? So that he always just got away with his bad behavior, but he never, I think, had the actual emotional support.
Yeah.
And, like, love and tending to from his parents.
Yeah. Okay.
And he was also clearly a sexual deviant from, like, a really young age.
Ooh, why?
Because one of the things that I was reading was, so when he was in these schools, he would constantly, like, without provocation or being asked, like, tell all of the stories of, like, all of the girls that he had sex with. And then the ways that he would, like, prove it is that he would record it and, like, play it for his friends. He would take pictures and show them to his friends. And so he was just, like, basically, he already was engaged in, like, kind of a, I guess, like a what would be considered, like, a not normal sexual being. Like, he had already kind of graduated at a very young age to, like, extreme strangeness. I don't know what the right word is.
I mean, yeah, I if you see my face right now, it's just like contorting and upset.
Right,
But
like that, like those poor girlfriends in high school that were like, wait, you passed pictures of us around, like of me, like around to all of your friends. Like, fuck you.
Also, like, if you think about it, he was born like 52, I think.
So this would have been the 60s.
Something like that, and he would have like had to get like a full camera out and be like, here
and
we
like
go.
develop that film.
Yeah.
Unless it was a Polaroid, which did that exist yet?
We're gonna have to get back to you on that.
I
I'm
don't know
not sure.
When did Polaroids become
Probably.
a thing? I feel like it maybe was that early.
I think so.
I don't know. It might have been the 80s.
Right. So then he goes. So yeah, he has like the military, emotionally neglected childhood, and then he goes into the U.S. Air Force, right?
Right. He goes in the Air Force. He basically, from what I could gather, had a real problem with authority, but was also a lazy fuck.
Right.
Like, was actually quite smart. Clearly had like the financial like backing to make something of his life, but never ever ever was willing to do the work. So he was in the Navy, but like hated all of his superior officers, and just by like the skin of his teeth managed to like get in and out of his time there without being like dishonorably discharged. But then was like a really kind of, couldn't keep a job, just, never wanted to work hard.
Right. Well, if you have your parents basically being like, you're perfect. Whatever you do, it's fine.
You're good. You never did that bad thing. It's just, it never happened. But also that was, part of his thing too, is when you don't want to work for something, but you're also smart and you're charming and you're well educated and you speak well and you can say things in French and you can quote like famous authors. You can really woo the ladies. And if you're a psychopath, you can also pick up on the weakest amongst them and you can basically figure out how to get somebody else to pay for your life, which was a trend of his. It's like finding women who were very insecure, very neglected, very desperate for affection, attention, and love. He would give that to them, and in turn, they would basically let him live with them and pay for everything.
And
Carol was
Bundy.
not the first, but she was probably the most prolific for him.
And the last he lived with, for sure.
Yeah.
So I guess, does this catch us up?
I think that's their backgrounds. Yeah, I think that catches us up a little bit. So now we go back to...
Yeah, Carol's on her, she's fled the...
She's
living in a... Now she's living in like a either an apartment.
Yeah, so she after she leaves her husband and has taken her kids to the women's shelter, she finds herself an apartment in Van Nuys, and I cannot remember the name of the property, but they did tell us that. So an apartment complex in Van Nuys, California, where the property managers are a couple named Jeanette and John, but he goes by Jack.
Oh yeah. Murray. Know this.
And Jack Murray is from Australia.
Stop it.
Yep, very, very handsome and gorgeous.
God bless you for knowing all this.
I mean, I told you I deep dive on.
I knew that he was a country western singer.
Yes, so he had moved to the U.S. from Australia to become a country western singer, and basically kind of failed at it in any kind of real way because he was very arrogant and like convinced that he was a bigger deal than he was yet.
Sure.
So he kind of shot himself in the foot. So he's a property manager who moonlights at a bar and sings at a bar.
Gotcha.
So not actually like a super successful country western singer.
Right.
But did apparently have a really good voice.
Okay.
So
I wish that we had taken
yeah, all right. So I feel like before we jump to the meet cute, let's just fill in this part of the story.
Yes.
So when Carol moves into the apartment that Jack Murray manages, she is smitten. He is very, very handsome, and he is actually very kind to her. He drives her to like the Social Security office and is like, you should get disability, you're blind. He also says you should get a second opinion about your prognosis, finds out that her eye issues are completely correctable with surgery. So then she gets surgery and she can see again, no problem. So now she's getting disability checks. Somebody comes over to help her with her children and clean their house, and she can see again. So he
Holy
really was like a
shnikey.
savior to her in certain ways.
And he also boned her.
But then they also were definitely like having an affair.
Because that's maybe, so here's my thing, like, how did that, I'm like trying to, if I was a fly on the wall, you know? Like, is she, because that's how she knows to, because she's always had to fuck whoever male she's around.
I think like in what they showed with her history is that, yeah, she basically,
She's like, I'm going to blow
she
you now,
was
thank you.
promiscuous
And he's like, no.
as a young girl because it gave her at least a moment of being the
control.
object of someone's affection
yeah.
as well. Like that is her like mother's rejection of her, I think, and her father's abuse and all of that, like really just made her desperate to, I think, to be seen. And
That
so
makes sense.
in those moments when, you know, she would be having sex with a man or a woman, because she also like went back and forth.
Okay.
Like her sexual identity was never solid in terms of whether or not she was more into men or women. But she was into Jack Murray. And he was a fucktard who was completely using her. She would buy him things because, as I mentioned earlier, he helped her get like all of this
Social
disability
Security,
money
yeah.
and then also fixed her eyes. So then she was able to go back to work and was making really good money. And she was paying
As a nurse practitioner.
as a nurse
I just feel like I have to say
practitioner,
that a lot.
But she was like loaning him money all the time, also thinking, well, if he owes me money, he'll never leave because like he's indebted to me. So
Right.
some really, really, really awesome like forward thinking on her part.
Right.
So eventually she confronts his wife, offers her $1,500 to leave Jack.
Right. I read that. Like, she bribes him.
Or she tries to
Tries to
bribe.
bribe her and is like,
And then the wife is like, well, let's
No.
see what Jack thinks. And then Jack was basically like, get the fuck out of here. I
And so
pick
they
my
evict
wife.
her.
And they basically evict her.
yeah.
Cut to, she's still obsessed with Jack, so she goes and visits the bar where he sings and moons over him.
Wait, can I ask a question?
Yeah, of course.
Where are the children? Because I have children, it
Yeah.
just upsets me so because I know this story is about to take a real nasty turn.
Well, the children are there, as
They're
far as
there.
I can tell. Like, they were with her at the apartment in Van Nuys. I feel like in everything that I was able to find online,
Yeah.
you know, I think specifically they don't mention the kids all that often. They do
Right.
come up a little bit when Doug Clark moves in and comes into the picture because
Right.
there was some incidences. Incident. Why doesn't it feel like that's a real word
It's
anymore?
not incident.
Incident. There, but how do
Say
you?
it in plural.
What's the plural version of
I think that you said it right. Incident?
Incidences.
Oh, no, it's incidents.
Oh, there were several incidences.
Yep.
I have to say that is with Doug Clark and her older son.
Oh,
But
okay, well,
we'll
that
save
upsets me just even knowing that.
But
okay.
I don't actually know like what the kid. I'm hoping they were in school and had like a really cool, kind, I don't know,
Teacher.
like teacher that was looking out for their best interest.
Let's hope. So,
So Vaughn, now you're gonna do the rom pipe.
okay, we're back in the romantic-ish moment. So Little Nashville, a bar in Burbank, where Jack Murray, this Australian, love that, American country western singer, is like singing, and she's like hanging out and just like, I guess, fawning. I mean, here's the thing. Averyn and I used to work in a bar for quite a few years, and
I still work in a bar.
Well, but yes, we worked in the same bar, so we would like. I guess we never worked together.
Right,
Anyways,
but we have mutual things we saw.
and the bar we worked at was not a dive, but it was not a.
It wasn't like a club. It was definitely a bar with regulars, people that you would get to know and see repeatedly.
And there were nights where you saw like real hard up, or maybe not hard up, but just like sad people connecting, and you're kind of like, okay, great. So like, look at that sad person connecting with that.
Look
Good
at that
for them.
meet cute.
Look at that real gross meet cute. And it's like that SNL thing that's on right now where they're like, it's really gross. Anyways, I can't go into it, but
Wait, what?
you know the SNL sketch
Where they,
Kate McKinnon,
where they just lots of tongue stuff
lots
happens.
of tongue, but that's kind of stuff you see late at night.
Yeah, you
where
do
people
actually
are looking
see that.
for like
A
anybody
place to sleep.
yeah, maybe a place to sleep, anybody to boink. I never even thought about
Yeah.
it that way. Oh my God, I'm so.
It makes me think of homeless Heidi
Privileged.
from High Maintenance.
Oh
Yeah,
yeah.
it's like you gotta have a place to rest your head. So
Right.
you do what you gotta do.
Oh wow.
Shelter is important.
By the way, High Maintenance is a great show, so watch that. HBO.
Yeah. So good.
So they're both at the bar. Carol Bundy's like checking out her.
And she is bummed because,
Yeah.
as far as what I understand,
probably ignoring
Jeanette
her.
was there, and after he was like done performing or whatever, they were like dancing and loving on each other, and he is basically ignoring her existence. And then she spots
Doug Clark.
an attractive blonde, although I've seen pictures and I beg to differ on both attractive and blonde.
Yeah, and all I know is that that's where they meet, and that's where they sort of like he like moves in with her immediately.
So basically the way it works is they have a great first like meeting. They just talk. He's very flattering. Like nothing actually happens. They don't go home together that night.
Wow.
But he gets her number, and she's, for the first time, like, her eye is on a different prize.
Right.
She's, like, temporarily distracted from Jack Murray. Then he does, in fact, call her. They go out on another date, and he insists on going back to her house, where she's always been, weirdly enough, even though you wouldn't know it from what we're telling you, she's actually always been pretty protective of her kids because of what happened with her abusive husband and all of that.
Right.
So she doesn't bring men home. She's not really like, this is mommy's new friend.
Yeah.
But he kind of insists, and he's very charming. And by the end of their first dinner together, like the kids are like sitting on his lap and like wrestling and having fun. And she is just swept up in the romance of it all. Like, here is finally the father for her kids.
Oh my God.
And then he informs her that he's going to be, or he tells the kids, sorry, not her. He's like, I just wanted to let you know I'm going to be spending the night. He does. And he basically never leaves. So the next day, he tells her that his landlord called and there's like some crazy stuff going on. So he's like being evicted. Could he move some of his stuff into her house? And basically starts freeloading off of her immediately. Oh. So that is how that starts.
Oh my God, I did not know that's so exciting.
Yeah. And then another aspect of it, so we'll just stop going totally chronological, I think, at this point.
Yeah.
Only because I feel like there's so many interesting facets of this tale, but also, like, the timeline of it, I feel like, even from what I could find, is not people aren't 100% certain of it.
It's true.
So he became pretty, like, once he had kind of control over her, was living there, he became pretty abusive towards her, kind of immediately stopped showing any kind of sexual interest in her, which is all she wanted, and she was desperate for it. And he would tell her, like, one of the things that they did together is they would like talk about their sexual like fantasies, and all of his stuff was like very, very dark, like weird stuff. Like he talked about having a sex slave, and she thought he meant like her. And he talked about like bringing young girls into their bed and threesomes and all this stuff. And eventually shared with her that he thought like the ultimate like sexual high he could ever have would be to actually kill somebody, a woman, not somebody, a woman, while either she was performing oral sex on him or they were having sex, like in the throes of it, to kill her.
I know.
And for some reason, this was exciting to Carol.
Because she was probably like, because of her fucked up upbringing, she was probably like, this is the way I could like make him happy and make him
bond with
stay.
him. Yeah, and I think like who knows, but like yuck. But yeah, so anyway, so they start sharing like these really dark, deep sexual desires. Sidebar, he's also terribly abusive and is abusing her older son. And the son, in the one article I read on Murderpedia, kind of describes it, that he was like, it was like Doug and I were in a battle for my mom's soul, and I knew that I had lost.
Oh, no.
And then they are sent to live. Their dad basically rounds them up and sends them off to live with their grandparents. So also,
thank God.
They didn't end up back with a bad dad either.
But I'm just saying, like, my whole thing reading all of this,
Right,
I'm like,
where are the children?
kids?
Yeah, because there were young kids that were like 9 and 5 or something.
I mean, that is
this was going on.
beyond. I cannot.
Yeah. So luckily, not luckily, obviously he's probably suffered horribly before they got away. But luckily, they did get away. So then now that they're sharing all their deep sexual kinky weirdness.
Right, the kids are out of the picture, thank God.
The kids are gone.
They can go and do some murders.
Doug comes. I know, right? Doug comes home one night though, covered in blood, and basically, I think he first lies and he's like, "Oh, I hit a cat or something," and she's like, "Why does the car look like that?" You know, inside
And
the car.
they had a van, right?
I think they had like a big old Buick or a giant car.
Yeah.
And so he basically confesses to her that he picked up two teenage sex workers, or not. I mean, you know what? Not sex workers, runaways. They were sitting on a bus. They were waiting for a bus. He picked them up. He basically forced.
Wait, did he not do any threesomes yet, or because wasn't that a thing?
That is a thing. I don't know the
the
order
chronological order
the
of that, but
chronological
yeah.
order. But so basically, he forces one of these two girls to perform oral sex on him and tells the other one to look away. She won't, so he shoots the other one in the head and then shoots the girl who he was
Performing
forcing to do stuff to him in the head. Neither of them are dead, so he shoots them both again, then takes their body to a warehouse where he, like tries to get rid of any kind of evidence, but he comes home like covered in blood, all of these things.
And we think this is his real first one, or we don't know.
So, according to what I was reading, these were the first two girls that were found, and these girls were stepsisters, and their names were Cynthia Chandler and Gina Morano, and they lived in Huntington Beach, in California, and they were troubled girls. Like they had run away a bunch. They were known to be truant. They had been, I think, dabbling in drugs. You know, they were young teenage girls, like going through stuff. So they had run away. Their parents, though, were desperately searching for them, and when they had heard news of like two girls turning up, they immediately called the police out of fear because their daughters had been gone.
Oh my God.
They were stepsisters. Their daughters had been gone. They identified them. All right. Now I want to, part of me is like, I want to almost like switch the perspective of the story.
Okay, bring it.
From the perspective of Carol and Doug to the perspective of like local law enforcement and what was
interesting.
going on. So, this is 1980. Mm-hmm. This, or 79 maybe even. I think they were caught in the 80s, or was it only the 80s?
I mean, it might have been that, but the time frame that I keep seeing, like on Wikipedia, was June to August in 80. I mean, like 3 months.
So
but
it
I
was
could
the
be,
summer
but
of
I
19,
could be
no,
wrong.
so it was the summer of 1980. Then I believe Wikipedia. Why would it ever be wrong? So basically, at the same time that these two start what they're doing, there is the Hillside Strangler. The murder rate in Los Angeles is like the highest it's ever been. Wow. And there's like massive heat wave, which does actually create lots of violence. It's like I think that's actually been like a study they've done scientifically that like when it's super, super hot, crime like swells.
That's interesting because when I worked at the bar in New York City, and it would be really at the end of summer when it was like super humid and hot, people, you just were on it. You know, like the owner would always be like, just be careful, you know?
People are just, I don't know, they're just hot.
They're mad.
And they're pissed off about it. That is not why this happened, but that was what was going on.
Yeah.
So.
Wait, what are the Hillside Stranglers?
So the Hillside Stranglers, I believe, were cousins. These are okay, so we're going to sidebar again, and we're just going to Google it.
Google it.
Because the Hillside Stranglers are pretty notorious. Did you ever see that amazing movie Copycat starring Sigourney Weaver and Holly Hunter? And, oh my God, also a country western singer turned actor. What's his name? He's so cute. No, he was in Hope Floats.
Boot Scoot Boogie?
No, you know who I'm talking about. He was in Hope Floats.
That guy, Henry Connick Jr.?
Yes, Harry Connick Jr.
Harry.
Copycat is an excellent movie.
I was, like, I think I was pretty young for that one, and I was, again, a very fearful person, as I am now, and I was like, you know what, I don't need that in my brain, so I did not see that, but that Copycat was based on Hillside Murders, or?
Well, so the Copycat is basically about copycatting serial killers. And Sigourney Weaver, oh my God. If you guys haven't seen this movie, which I'm assuming if you listen to any podcast about true crime, you've 100% seen it. But if you haven't, watch it. Okay. So Sigourney Weaver is like an expert psychologist on serial killers. And that's all I'm going to say. But copycat, I feel like, kind of tells you. So there's a serial killer out there that's copycatting all the famous serial killers. What? So the Hillside Stranglers, are one of them, which is where my familiarity with that story comes from. That's where you know it. But they were basically discovered to be, Hillside Stranglers. They were cousins named Kenneth Bianchi and Angelo Bono Jr. They kidnapped, raped, tortured, and murdered at least 10 women and girls ranging in age from 12 to 28 years old in Los Angeles between October 1977 and February 1978.
That's very upsetting.
So I don't know when they were caught and if that was kind of what, when we were reading about it going on simultaneously, it's that the murders maybe hadn't happened yet, but like they were looking for these serial killers. Right. So from the law enforcement perspective, they find these 2 girls. They've both been shot in the head with a small caliber gun and then shot more than once. Then a few weeks later, they find the beheaded body of Exie Wilson and another woman, the body of another woman only a couple miles away named Karen Jones, both also shot in the head with the same caliber gun, which was later proven to be the same weapon. Exie, though, was decapitated. Yeah. Then they found Marnette Coma was her name a few weeks later, and then she'd also been shot in the head with the same caliber gun, but time of death put her death 3 weeks prior, which meant that she would have been his first victim. Oh my God. So like chronologically, Marnette was killed before the other 4, but found after them. Okay. And so the police are like very, very reluctant to put out into the media the idea of another serial killer. Right. But all of the women who worked on the Sunset Strip were becoming increasingly concerned that there was a man out there that was hunting them. Yeah. And there was just all kinds of fear that there's like another serial killer in Los Angeles, and there was. Right. All right, so now I'm flipping back, to the story that we're telling.
I'm in.
But that was kind of like how it happened from the police officer's perspective, the multiple police officers. Okay, so he confesses to Carol that he had picked up 2 girls and he had killed them. And she's just like, cool, whatevs. So then he goes out and does it again, but this time he comes home with a head that he puts in the freezer. And then Carol finds the head, and to do something nice for her her lover, one. She basically puts a bunch of makeup on it and is like, here is this beautiful decapitated head for your pleasure. Ew. He actually lost his mind on her and told her that she did a terrible job. The makeup looked terrible and her fingerprints were going to be all over the head. Oh, he's like the worst person alive.
She's like, I was just trying to do something nice.
I was just trying to do something we could do together. You decapitate the head, I'll make it up.
She's like, I'm working 60 hours at the hospital.
Yeah. And I still put makeup on the dead head. Yeah. So anyway, they decide they've got to get rid of the head after Doug Clark basically, so one of his things was necrophilia.
Yeah, I read that.
Which is something that I just can't even wrap my brain around.
Right, because there's got to be poop and stuff.
But also just where does that come from? A desire to have sex with a dead person. I don't know. I just can't even wrap my brain around it. So anyway, after they scrub the head clean, so there's no trace evidence on it, Carol buys a very ornate, fancy looking treasure box type thing that they put the head in and toss into an alley, but they purposely wanted it to be found, I think. They didn't toss it anywhere where it would be hard to find it. Right. So a guy whose name I should have written down, yet again, I'm going to remember to write more names down. He can't pull his car either into or out of his garage because his box is in the way. Gets out and he's like, ooh, a treasure chest. Whoa, what did I find? So he goes to open it, and it's kind of strange. So when he first opens it, there's weird kind of clothing. So he starts to kind of move through it. Then there's the decapitated head of Exie Wilson. So he immediately calls the cops. They come. There is a pair of, I believe, little jean shorts and then a pink shirt that says Daddy's Girl are the things in the box with the head. They can't figure out anything based off of those items. There's no trace evidence, but she's been shot in the head because now they have her head with the same caliber gun as all the other 4 women they found. Oh, my God. And then a week later, they find Marnette Comer.
So 5.
So that's 5. Then, at some point, so Carol knows about all of this. At some point, he takes her along for a ride, and they pick up a prostitute a sex worker. I don't want to say prostitute. I feel like that's a derogatory term. A sex worker who calls herself Kathy. They have a plan. Carol's in the back seat. She has a gun. So she's going to watch the sex worker, Kathy, do her thing. And then if she decides that she's going to shoot the girl and get in on the murder action,
Right.
she's supposed to say, I'm having a blast. And that means she's going to shoot the girl. But because I think part of the reason that Doug has all of his weird sexual things that he does is he's actually incredibly sexually inadequate, this woman is incapable of arousing him.
Oh my God.
He gets very angry, tells Carol, to give him the gun. The girl is like, wait, what's going on? And then he grabs the gun and shoots her. And Carol describes the sensation of didn't scare her. In fact, she thought it was kind of fun.
Ew.
So then they put a jean jacket over the girl so that no other drivers will notice that there's a dead body basically laying on the lap of Carol in the car.
Oh my God.
So Carol is still, by the way, this entire time, obsessed with and pining over Jack Murray. Still going to see him at the bar.
Right.
Still desperately trying to get him back.
She's like, that was less abusive.
Right. She's
that
like,
was
you
better.
were a less bad guy. Oh, shit. I have to be so much better about organizing these thoughts. So another creepy thing that Carol and Doug did is they had an 11-year-old girl who lived across the hall from them in their apartment complex that basically that Doug's definitely did and Carol occasionally did sexual things with and took pictures of her and it was a whole thing. And I don't know much more information about her. I hope that they
didn't kill her though.
No.
They just did
terrible
ruined
things
her
to her.
life.
They I really do hope that wherever she is now, that she is doing well. And these people were the worst. So she is always asking Jack, slipping him notes, can we please have sex? Can we please have sex? And what I also learned from my research is when she was having sex with these guys, they were basically just having her perform oral sex on them. No one was ever doing anything for her.
I see.
And
Poor lady.
so she is hanging out, pining over him again, drinking, and maybe getting a little loose-lipped about what's been going on at home.
Right.
And then Jack is like, well, I think that I'm going to have to call the cops about that. And she's like, oh, no, I'm just kidding around.
Yeah, he gets alarmed. He's like, oh, shit.
Right,
Can you imagine that conversation?
Yeah.
You're just hanging out and somebody's like, so we did this. Are you jealous?
Yeah, and you're
And
like,
they're
no, I'm
"Oh,
not jealous.
But if you're serious,
But we
that's
should
actually
definitely call the cops."
really a problem.
So she becomes convinced that he is a liability. Then also she propositions him for sex again, and he says only if you'll bring somebody else. So she brings along the 11-year-old girl.
No.
And this is actually what they say is the breaking point for Carol. His desire of this 11-year-old is the first time that she feels and I don't know what it was about this moment, but she's disgusted by Jack for the first time. Because obviously he's a disgusting person.
Yeah.
I love that everyone in the story is a terrible pedophile.
Yeah.
Even though she murders this guy, I'm kind of probably that's okay.
Yeah.
So she's like, no, you can't. She's just for Doug. Because also she's a horrible, disgusting person. So she becomes more and more convinced that he's going to go to the cops. So she keeps going to the bar.
Yeah.
One night she sees him. He's with another woman who I guess was his current girlfriend at the time, even though he still had the wife.
Oh.
And they hang out. And then eventually this girl leaves and she's like, come on, let's go to your van.
Oh, it's his van.
Mm-hmm.
Oh.
And so he's like, well, I guess the other girl left. We'll go to my van.
He's like,
so,
I would like to be sucked off.
Yeah. So she has him lie on his stomach, and then she shoots him in the back of the head. He doesn't die, so then she stabs him multiple times and then cuts his head off.
Also, here's the thing. I mean, just how do you do that? Easily.
You don't.
Yeah. Okay.
I can't even imagine what it would take to cut off someone's head.
Barf.
Just the physical strength it would take.
I remember having got my degree in theater. I know I'm a winner. But I remember having a teacher we were talking about like Shakespeare, maybe it was Henry, I can't remember which one, but they talk about like taking someone's head off. Oh no, it was Macbeth.
Oh yeah,
And
with all the killings.
The teacher was this like crazy old dude, and he was like, "Can you imagine? Like, really, you got to get in there. You got to be strong. You can't just." And he goes into it, and I'm like,
Yeah, no, and it's so you're right. It's like so creepy.
yeah. So anyways, so she does it, but maybe it helped that she was a registered nurse and she knew
I was gonna say
how to
maybe
like
she like
figure
knew
it out.
the right things to cut. I don't know. Anyway, she contacts Doug to help her dispose of the head to hide evidence. So at this point, they are starting to think about because now their case has caught like news, like people are talking about it. There's a murderer out there. These women are being shot in the head with this caliber of a gun, and they're like, "Oh Jesus," you know. So they're trying to hide evidence, but then he's like, "You're so stupid. Like, just because you took his head, like the shell casings from when you fired the gun are still going to be in the van." So now everybody's just panicked. And by everybody, I mean Carol and Doug are totally kind of losing it, and especially Carol. She is like popping like anti-anxiety tablets, like it's, I don't know, Haribo gummy bears if you're me.
Right.
And she is just like, she's about to pop. She's about to burst. She's gonna just tell, you know, you can just tell.
She's feeling guilty, maybe?
Well,
or she's just scared of getting
I think
caught?
she's probably both.
Yeah.
Also, she did kill, a man she very much loved. So,
Right.
I guess one day she goes, shortly after this, they find his body, sorry. So they find the body of Jack in his van. Did I mention it was a heat wave in Los Angeles? And he'd been in there for 5 days.
Gross.
So it was a horrifying scene. And so now they've got this, which they're like, weirdly, this is like the same exact style, but instead of being like a young runaway or sex worker, it's a grown man. So that's like very confusing for detectives.
Right.
Carol is just, she's kind of losing it and basically goes into work one day and starts like confessing to everything that's been going on.
So she's in the break room.
Mm-hmm. And the women were like,
like, ladies, listen, I've got something. I
and
gotta
they
get off my
believe,
chest.
and they believe her. So they call the cops. By the time the cops get there, she's already left the hospital. So they go to her house where they arrest her. But when they open the door to be like, you're under arrest or whatever, she is there and she's like handing them things. She's like, these are the underwear of all of his victims. These are all the things that he kept. This is a whole book of pictures of him with an 11-year-old girl who lives across the hall. So she is just throwing damning evidence about Doug Clark to the cops. Then they go get Doug, who, is being all like, it's my girlfriend and her boyfriend, Jack Murray, were doing all of this. And they're like, yeah, no, buddy, you're coming with us. At the very least, you're a pedophile.
Yeah.
And he admitted to helping dispose of Jack Murray's head. Because he's smart.
Oh, my God.
Yeah. So they got him. And then it's like even more bananas shenanigans. Like, he says that Carol and Jack did it and tried to frame him. But Jack can be like really, really, really alibied for 3 of the murders. Like where like hundreds of witnesses can say he was there.
Right.
And
He's
so
on stage singing his Australian country western.
Right, in his beautiful Australian tenor or whatever, baritone. I'm not sure what it was. But so then he says that it was just Carol and that she is obsessed with the serial killer Ted Bundy and thinks of herself as the bride.
She's masterminding the whole thing.
She's the bride of Ted Bundy because her name's Carol Bundy, and that she actually did all of it. She cops to immediately killing Jack and being in the car with the Jane Doe who called herself Kathy. So she is booked on those 2 murders. And then even more bananas, like insanity, ensues. So she basically was going to try to plead insane. She is found to be completely sane. I mean, messed up, but like not in the kind of way that she wouldn't have known that what they were doing was wrong. And she was going to be tried, and right before trial actually switched her plea to guilty instead of not guilty to avoid the death penalty. Doug, on the other hand, wasted years and years of like the court's times with legal proceedings. He wanted to like represent himself. He kept saying that his lawyers were like not like in
drunk.
his best.
That's what I read.
Yeah, like drunk or not in his best.
And
so basically, his case was like actually transferred to like different judges because the judges were finally like fuck this shit. Like, this guy is insane and, like, won't, like, let us do the legal process. So finally they find a judge who's like, okay, I guess you can defend yourself. And he gets himself convicted of all the murders and and put on death row.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which he is still alive today.
He is still alive today. Carol died in, I think, 2003 or 5 of heart disease or
Heart failure.
heart
Yeah.
failure. But yeah, he's still alive today, still maintains his innocence, and that it was all Carol and Jack.
Right. You can like watch video of him. I mean, whatever.
I mean, judge for yourself, but it was him.
Yeah.
Like,
But wasn't he convicted only based on her testimony? There wasn't, I mean, yes, there were.
so, okay, there were a couple of things. The guns were in her name. So that was an argument he had.
What an asshole.
But they were stored in the boiler room at the factory where he worked.
Right.
They did find where the stepsisters I mentioned, where he had taken them to like a rented garage. They found the garage. They found basically like the crime scene, and there was a bloody boot imprint that was a perfect match for the boots that he was wearing when they arrested him.
Yeah.
They had the book of photos with him with the 11-year-old girl, which for me is enough to be like death penalty.
Yeah.
So even though I think that like what they had was Carol's testimony, there was enough physical evidence to make it beyond a reasonable doubt that
the jury was like, bye-bye.
Yeah, like, we got you, it was you.
And this is like sad because it's not sad. They're both very awful people, but he's, as I've heard, he's, charging people $2 million a year, being in the court system or being in the prison system.
Oh, right.
We are paying $2 million a year to keep him alive.
As your man likes to point
Yes,
out.
my
Like, what's
husband's
the
a
deal
bit of a
with
conspiracy
with the death row?
Yeah.
But
which I feel,
I think we'll all agree to say, like, what's the deal with privatized prisons? And that's a totally separate podcast.
Yep.
But one more thing I wanted to note, because I actually took note of this. So,
Please.
because we've just been talking so much about, like, how horrible all this is and how, neither of them are innocent and, in fact, both pretty awful. But going back to her childhood and, everything that she went through and how she just turned into, like, the person that she was. So one of the things that I found really fascinating when I was researching this is because I love FBI profilers. That's actually, I think I'm maybe less interested in the killers and more interested in the people who catch killers.
Remind me what an FBI profiler
Okay. Did you ever watch like Mindhunter on Netflix? No,
didn't.
You didn't, because you don't like that stuff. So a profiler is somebody who is an expert in the psychopathy and psychology of serial killers. Okay. They can come basically see the systems of like who the victims are and all of the details of the crimes, and they can put together a profile of who the person that committed those crimes is. So they can tell you like that is a white male in his teens. That is a white male in his 50s. It's always a white male. But that is this kind of a person. So that's basically like you should watch Mindhunter also because it's really good. But basically, I think it was created in the 70s maybe, the Behavioral Analysis Unit. And it's a bunch of experts on behavior and in the psychopathy and psychology of serial killers. And they can put together profiles that are like sometimes freakishly like spot on. Like he's a mailman.
Like,
like
they
that
would have
specific.
known that Doug Clark was born from a rich family, or
maybe, or that he was impotent, or like all those things. But so there was an FBI profiler whose name was Dr. Robert Hazelwood.
Okay.
And he and 2 other psychologists did a study on the wives and or girlfriends of serial killers.
Fascinating.
And even though they never name any names, one of them seemed very specifically about Carol Bundy. And he basically came up with how serial killers can get the women in their lives to basically become their accomplices. So I just wanted to read to you the 5 steps that a woman is put through.
Dying to know.
So the first is identification. The serial killer or the psychopath identifies a vulnerable, easily controlled person. The second step is seduction. They get that woman to fall in love with them. Then there's reshaping the woman's sexual norms. That's the third step. Introducing her to sexual images and acts that may offend or frighten her, but which she must do to please the man and keep him involved with her. Fourth, social isolation, cutting her off from her family and friends. And then fifth, punishment. physical, verbal, and sexual, which further erodes the woman's self-esteem and ability to act of her own accord. So in short, it's basically a dominant and a submissive. Yeah. And I would say that even though they're both guilty, I think it's very clear that in this relationship, he was the dominant and she was the submissive.
I think so,
too. He was cutting off the head and she was putting makeup on it.
Right. And, like, this reminds me of, the whole horrifying Elizabeth Smart thing where the guy was, like, the second coming, and he had his, like, the woman who was his minion who helped him, kidnap the girl or whatever.
But, yeah, it's the fact crazy. That, like, that women in these stories get, basically, whether or not they're coerced or forced or whatever, but they do help.
Yeah.
And that's one of the worst things ever, is I always go back to when I think about this story, that the one that the Jane Doe called herself Kathy. It's like she got into a car with a man and a woman, and that immediately made her feel more safe.
Right.
Even though she was a sex worker, it's like there are things,
But you don't think, it's true.
You just don't think, like, when you get in a car with a couple, you're not worried that you're in danger from, like, a predatory male, because there's already a woman there.
A very small percentage of that happening, right?
Right.
Like,
yeah, it's unlikely, and so of course
she won the lottery of murder.
Yeah, she won the bad lottery.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that is the story of the Sunset Strip killers.
Wow.
Who are not notorious, as far as I can tell.
No, they're not. But it's so
But maybe should
upsetting.
have been. Right?
They should have been, yeah. And I guess one thing that, like, as sort of a person who's like, what can we do? What could have been better? Well, who knows? But I do think, giving any solace to runaways out there, like, geez, Louise, there is, we found like a number you could call if anybody is a runaway.
Yeah, if you run away, that ways for you to get help so that you aren't forced to be out on the streets to survive.
1-800-RUNAWAY, and also you can text 6008. 66008.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Offering a little help. That's where I'm like, okay, it's gonna be fine.
Well, no, and I think one of the things that's fascinating about true crime and why I'm fascinated with it is that I feel like I've told you this before. So much of being interested in wanting to learn about it is arming yourself with information.
Totally.
So that, like, if you ever find yourself in a situation,
like, I'm gonna be ready.
Like, I will know. Yeah. All of the warning signs. And of course, like, you will never know. You know what I mean? Like, these people are master predators, but there is something very comforting in being like, I am very aware of the things to look for, of the things to avoid, of all of those things, and it makes me feel more prepared in life.
I get that. Yeah. I totally get that.
Whether or not that's, it's not a practical application for my obsession.
And we've talked about it before, like, she goes to bed to,
all the things.
Law and Order SVU, and I go to bed to stand up.
Right. I do. I literally, right now, I've been falling asleep to, what is it called? It's called, like, 72 Hours, a true crime show. And it's basically a Forensic Files 17.0. And it's wonderful.
I love you, Averyn.
I love you, Vonia.
You're the best. Thank you guys for listening to this episode of
This was
Crime.
Definitely our darkest one so far.
It was really dark. I'm going to need to eat like a piece of cheesecake, Golden Girls style, and like... and
maybe watch an episode of Golden Girls.
Oh, that would actually make me happy. Yeah. Thank you. Let's do that.
Let's definitely do that. Okay, Thank you for being a friend, Vonia.
Thank you for being a friend. I love you.
Love you.